And now go to Johnny. So go to Window and actually start meeting, I think, at the top. We want to see Show Manage Participants. And then there's Johnny right there. Click More and make him a host. And now he can, click OK. And now he can do the same thing, open up the participants. And when if people don't mute, he can mute them. Right.
All right, Johnny, you are now a host. And so you can be on mute people if needed. But again, this is casual. I do want people to chime in and ask questions if they need.
Cool.
Anybody work with Flexbox before? You guys can chime up in the chat or just feel free to speak verbally. All right. All right. Let's go ahead and get started, everybody. So let me go ahead and share my screen. And then I'm going to also drop in some source code here for you guys. All right. Can you guys see this? I just highlighted a bunch of text. Can you guys see that? Okay, cool. Just making sure I'm sharing the right screen. And then I'm going to go ahead and drop some source code here. Let's see, which one do I want?
Can you increase the font size there?
Yeah, I'm going to do that. I just have to figure out how to get back to the dang chat. Where did my chat go? Let's see. Here, let me stop sharing for just a second so I can get my chat back. There it is. And then we're going to drop in this. Okay. Everybody see that source code in there? Flexboxy starter. See it there in the chat? All right, perfect. People are getting it. So go ahead, download that file. It's a Trojan. Just kidding. Download the file, open it up in your text editor, whatever you use. And then I'm going to go back to sharing my screen, and then I'll zoom up on my text editor here. All right, gonna zoom there. Zoom there. All right, excellent. Okay, so what we're gonna be building, everyone, is we're just gonna get a very basic top-level overview of Flexbox. Okay, so traditionally for the last years, I have been using Bootstrap to build all my layouts using rows and columns. I've been a Bootstrap guy and never really used anything else. And then recently, I was introduced to Flexbox, and I really, really like it. Flexbox just really allows you to lay out elements in a single direction, either as like a row or a column. So either left to right or right to left and top to bottom or bottom to right. So in the past, if you weren't using like a third-party framework like Bootstrap, a lot of people would try to use like tables and other types of grids or use a bunch of floats, and things just get really messy and really out of control. And the nice thing with Flexbox, because it's native to CSS, is when you build using this, it makes your projects really, really light. Whereas Bootstrap, it has so much going on. I mean, you can download the Bootstrap package and put it into your project, but there's probably hundreds of things in that library that you're not even using, and it just bloats your project. So Flexbox is native to CSS. There's no third-party anything installed. So All right, cool. So that's just a basic overview of that. So let's dive into the project. This is what we're going to be building here. I've got, I think, 5 or 6 examples, and we're just going to go through and build each one of these elements, and we're just going to get this desired layout. So very, very easy examples here. So what we're going to do here is first have your project opened up here. And I'm just going to right click on my index file, and then I'm going to hit copy path. And what I'm doing is I'm just going to paste the path in my web browser. That way, let me open up a new window here. That way we can just load up the project. So cool. So this is what we're going to be starting out with right here. All right, so the first thing that we're going to work with is input fields. I feel like with input fields, this is something we use a lot in projects. By default, HTML will give input fields a fixed width and everything. But sometimes if we have input fields in like some type of a box or a card, and we want these input fields to take up the entire width, trying to use the width element or property can be a huge pain because you're like setting width to like 500 or 600 pixels. And you can see here we've got name and then another title down here. They're different lengths. And so trying to set the widths on these is a royal pain because they have to be different widths, right, to fill up the rest of this box because the title here before it is a different length. So Flexbox, that's where Flexbox comes in, and it makes things like this incredibly easy. So let's go ahead and just dive into the first example here. And I'm going to be switching a lot between screens like this, so if you get dizzy or have a seizure, I apologize. All right, I'm going to collapse this menu here. So we're going to start at the top here, and you can see on line 15 about, it says first example. So we've just got our container, form wrapper, and then we've just got our labels and inputs. And the goal here, what we want to do is we want to take these input fields and expand the entire width of this box. Okay, so over here in the CSS, I've got 2 screens or split display, so you can see my HTML and CSS. So you can see on the container, the parent here, I've simply just added some dimensions to it. And then the first parent that we're going to be working here with is the form row. We're going to be working with this parent and then the children inside of it. So what we can do here is we're simply just going to press enter. And to use the Flexbox properties, we're going to put a display, a flex. And so what this has done for us is it has now made these parent containers, the form row, it's now made it a what we call a flex container. And then what we can do with that is in its the children here, these child elements, or also known as flex items, we can now add Flexbox properties to these elements here. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and save this here. Let me get this out of my way. All right, cool. And come over here, refresh. You can see things just tidied up just a little bit. Not much has changed because what we want to do now is target the child elements that are within the parent. So by making this a flex container, what it has done is it's giving it a flex direction of left to right. All right, just like in regular HTML, elements will always stack from left to right. But now we've just created this flex container that is going to help us align all this content here. So back into our CSS, we're going to target the input field now, and we're going to add one simple property. And we're going to write flex 1. All right, and in the next example, I'm going to be able to better explain what just happened here. But basically what this flex 1 did is it set a base for us that says this number 1, we want it to distribute the rest of this element equally in the available space. So by setting this, by only having one flex item here with this flex 1 on it, this property, we have now told the input field to take up all available space. So if we come over here, I'm going to go ahead and refresh it. And you can see that it's now taking up the rest of the space, okay? And look what's cool. Now as we flex our browser, because we've got this in a flex container and have the flex of 1, it's always going to take up the rest of the available space. Now, in the past, what we've done, if we're not using Flexbox, let me show you how horrible this could be. So I'm going to take this, I'll comment it out. And then the traditional way that we've done this is added it a width to it. So say we want like 500 pixels. So what we've done is we've just added a fixed pixel, but now our input fields aren't even. Would literally have to give this a different class and this a different class, so we could target each one and then try to add different widths to them, which is going to change. And then look what happens when we go mobile. Let me take the display flex off this. Now we've got this fixed width of 500 pixels. So Flexbox is just amazing because it allows this parent to turn into a flex container, and it's just going to flex with the viewport of the screen. So it's really easy to make things mobile friendly that way. So let's go ahead and add these properties back. I'm going to delete that. We'll go ahead and save. Cool. So pretty easy. Now, the next example we're going to do is we're going to dive into a little bit deeper into this Flex 1 property that we added about how we can distribute space with multiple elements. So what we're going to do next is we're going to create these 3 columns, and we're going to set the width of these to be different and to take up an equal amount of space to what we set the flex to. So back over to our project in our HTML. What I want you to do is under second example, around line 29, I want you to go ahead and uncomment everything to the top of third example. So about down to line 48. I just clicked at the top, held shift, clicked at the bottom to highlight everything. And then I'm on a Mac, so I'm going to hit command / to uncomment it. Okay. I'm going to go ahead and save that. And then let's come over to our browser here, refresh. And you can see that we've got 3 different columns here. All right. Now, if I, on this form row, sorry guys, go ahead and, what project am I in? Oh, what happened here? Shoot. I've already got some properties accidentally added here on the starter HTML. Maybe it's not on yours, but it's on mine. So I'm going to go ahead and make sure I delete this. Bear with me. So second, I want to take the display flex off that. Okay. All right, cool. So in our HTML, we've got our container that wraps everything. And then we've got a parent that wraps the first body of text, a parent that wraps the second body of text, and then a parent that wraps the third body of text. So in regular HTML, being div tags, these are block elements, so they're just going to traditionally stack on top of each other. All right. Now let's go ahead to the parent here, our column layout, and we're going to add what property? The display flex, right? Because what does flex do? By default, this is going to take everything. It's going to turn this into a flex container, and all the elements in it, it's now going to turn it into a row, a flex direction row. So if we were to refresh this, you now can see that everything is lined up in a row. So by default, when we add a display of flex, a default property that's added onto that parent is a flex direction. And there's 2 flex directions in Flexbox. There's a row, which lines up everything from left to right. And then there's a column, which aligns everything from top to bottom. So if I was to go over here and do a flex direction and say we did column, it's now going to stack these elements in the same way that we had it stacked before, because we just put everything in a column. By default, remember it's a row. So if I put this back to a row and refresh, everything's back into its row. All right, and I'm going to go ahead and delete this. We don't need a default property here. Now, coming over here and looking at this, you'll notice that the first element here is a lot bigger than these two other elements with the text in it, right? And the reason this is happening, it happens by default as the browser interprets the HTML. Basically, the browser says, wow, this is a huge body of text. I'm just going to give it a little bit more room to breathe. And so by default, the browser is going to make this body of text larger than these two, just to give it more breathing room. Now, the goal, what we want to do here, is we want to make these columns set an evenly distributed width to each one of these columns. And guys, feel free to chime in if you have questions. I don't have the chat open, so Johnny, if you see something going on in the chat, someone has a question, feel free to stop me, or someone can speak up and just ask me a question as I'm going along here.
Will do.
All right, thanks. All right, so we've just taken our parent here, and we've made this our Flex container. So I'm echoing if someone wants to mute.
It's probably me.
Oh, yeah, Nathan, geez, bro. Same room with me, and he pipes in and got all this echo going on. But anyway, so we've got 3 parents here. We've got the main column, the sidebar 1, and the sidebar 2. So what we did last time with those input fields is we added a flex to it, a flex property, and then we put a value of 1, which means take this and distribute the space evenly to whatever space is available. So if we come to the main column and we do a flex of 1, remember flex 1 is our base, and I'm just going to go ahead and copy this. I am the king of copy and paste and hotkeys, which doesn't always work when you're coding, but it's just habit. So I'm going to go ahead and save this. And what I've just done here is, go ahead and mute, Nate. Thanks. What I've just done here is these 3 parents that wrap the text content is by putting a flex basis of, or a flex of 1, we've just told these 3 columns, these 3 parents, to distribute space evenly between the entire viewport. So if we come over to our project and we now refresh this, you can now see that the width of each one of these parent wrappers is now evenly distributed. They're all the same size, okay? So what we want, though, is we want the main content, the main column, to be a little bit wider than the other 2. So what if we did this? We could take, if we want this main column to be twice as big as the sidebars, well, let's just do some math and hit a 2, right? That would make it twice as big, because 1 is our base, and now we want something twice as big as the base. So let's go ahead and save that. Refresh. Check that out. And let's go ahead and make this 1 or 3 times the size. So now we've got it 3. And now we've just made it 3 times the size. Now, if we go over to the polished version of it, you'll see that the main column is in the center, and then our sidebars are on the left and right side. However, in here, we've got the main column, stacking from left to right, just the same way that we've written our HTML. Now, I could go in and rearrange our HTML. I could take this main column and I could just slap it in the middle of the sidebars, and traditionally, if I wasn't using Flexbox, that's exactly what I'd do. But Flexbox has this really amazing property that you can use for ordering different elements. Now, the reason in this case we wouldn't want to rearrange the HTML and would probably prefer to use an ordering system with Flexbox is, if we think about this, we're building a website, maybe we're selling a product or something, the main column here is probably going to have, is the meat and potatoes of our website. It's the column that's giving all the information, probably has all the keywords, the main title here. So for SEO, search engine optimization, when people are Googling your website, this column is going to be the one that's feeding in like the titles and keywords for people to find your website. So if we took this and made it the second element, slapped it in between these, then this sidebar here is what would be being picked up on SEO. So enough talking with that. Let's go ahead and do some ordering. So Flexbox makes it so easy for us. So we want this main column here to be in the center. We've got 3 columns. So we're going to go ahead and set this to order 2. Okay. And then sidebar 1 is the one that comes first. We're going to go ahead and set this to order 1. And then our sidebar 2 we want to be last. And we're going to go ahead and add order 3. Go ahead and save that. Come over here, refresh, and voila. And there you have it. Really, really cool. Flexbox just makes it so easy to be able to reorder content. And this is really neat as well, because when you're working with a mobile, say when we shrink this down into mobile, right now, remember, we've got a flex of 1, or 1, 3, and 1, so it's distributing the content evenly. Imagine if we were to shrink this down to mobile, we could then make a media query that says, hey, when it gets to this viewport size, make the main column order 1, and then order 2 and order 3, and then we could display, instead of the flex row, we could switch it to a flex column, so everything stacks on top of each other. So kind of cool. We'll do that a little bit later here. All right, so this is the second example here. Now we've worked with some columns. We've got everything space distributed evenly, dependent on the flex size that we gave it. Now what we want to do is we want to create some columns, but we want to work with margin this time. We don't have any margin happening here. So if we come over to the final project here, what we're going to do is we're going to create these 3 boxes, and we're going to evenly distribute the space in them. All right, so let's come back over to the project. If we scroll down around line 50, you're going to see something that says third example. Go ahead, and we're going to uncomment this. I'm going to fall all the way down. So here's the 5th example. So about line 75 is the end. I'm going to hold shift and click, command /. All right, and then go ahead and save that. And then on our project, let's go ahead and refresh. All right, cool. So now we've got our 3 elements here, and they're stacked on top of each other. And what we're going for is making everything in these 3 separate columns. So going and checking out our, oh, let's see, I uncommented something I didn't want to. Go ahead and comment out the 4th example. I apologize. Save that. Refresh. Okay, there we go. That's what we wanted. So it's about line 66 is where the 3rd example ends. All right, so let's check out what we have going on here. So we've got our container. Okay, so this is our parent class. And then inside of that, we've got these callout classes. And then inside of that, we've got our text content in there. So we've got a 1, 2, 3 callouts here. Okay, I'm going to scroll down here to the 3rd example. So I set some basic styles here. So our container has a max width, it has some margin. On our callouts here, we've got some padding, box sizing, and margin. And then the callouts, I just set different colors to those is all. So the first thing that we want to do is we want to take these 3 callouts, and we want to display these in a row. Does anybody know how to do that? Johnny, go ahead and see if anybody answers in the comments, or someone can just talk out loud. Dum, 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 dum. Wow, everybody speak up at once. No one has an answer. All right, guys. Let's go ahead and do this. So right now, we've got these block elements stacked on top of each other. Remember, a display, a flex, we want to turn the parent container into a flex container, and we do a display of flex on that. Because why? The default property of a display flex stacks elements left to right, and by default puts that flex direction of row. So if we go ahead and we save this, refresh this, now we've got everything lined up in a row, exactly what we want. Now, what's really cool about this is you'll notice again, just like what we experienced with these columns up here, this feature 1 has more text content in it than feature 2 and feature 3. So by default, the browser is going to give this one more space. Feature 2 has a little bit less, and feature 3 has the least. And so you can see the column spaces are different here. Now, I want to show you something else really neat here. Let me show you, where is it? Okay, so when you also add a display of flex onto a parent element, it adds a default behavior. I think this was, yeah, line items. It adds a default behavior to the children in here, or the flex items, and it gives it an align items of stretch. Okay, and what this does is you'll notice that all of these are of equal height. Even though the text inside of it has a different amount, this align item stretch takes these columns and makes the column sizes all equal sizes. I don't know if you've tried to build layouts using floats. When you put content inside of an element, the element is as tall as the content that is inside of it. So check this out. If I was, I'm just going to comment this out. You don't have to do it. I'm going to go ahead and save this. Refresh. Notice the column it has nothing in it. There's no elements inside of this, nothing. But it still has the same exact height as the rest of these other columns here. Now, let me go ahead and add that back. I'm just going to uncomment it. So check this out. If I was to do align items, let's just do, there's a property called flex start. Okay, and let me show you what this does. Refresh this. Oh, is that right? Did I save this? Did I refresh? Why isn't that changing for me? Maybe I did it wrong. Maybe it's not flex start. Maybe it's just start. Oh, shoot. My example is failing me. All right. We'll come back out to that. We'll come back to that. No, there's... Let me see, guys. This is bothering me. Align. Maybe it's align content. Bear with me here. Flex start. All right. I don't know. We'll come back to that later. Later day. Essentially, there is a property that can be added. And what it does is it sets the element to its traditional size. Say we didn't want this to be of equal height, the columns to be equal height. We want it to be the exact height of whatever's inside of these elements. And so there's a property that's called something, and then there's flex start, which starts it at the top to bottom. And so everything will be aligned at the top, and then each one gets a little bit shorter. And then there's... yeah, and then flex end, which stacks it at the bottom. But anyways, let's get all these columns to be equal space. So we know that we want 3 equally columns of equal width here. So does anybody remember how to do that? We're going to be working with the parent call out right here. This, not a parent, but a child. Anybody know what property we're going to add?
Nate says justify content.
Nathan, you are so incorrect.
So wrong.
But good guess. So we're going to take the child here, or the flex item, and we're going to add a flex property called flex. We did that already, right? And we want to set it to 1. So it's going to take each of these set a base of 1, and it's just going to distribute it evenly between all of them. So if we go ahead and refresh, now everything's evenly distributed. Oh, you guys, I was right in what I was trying to do before, except I needed to evenly distribute everything so that the content changes. So you can see that we've got our equal width or equal height columns here. And it's set to be equal to whatever element has the most content in it. So let me go back to this again. I knew I was right. Let's do flex start. I'm going to go ahead and save that. I'm going to be humiliated, guys, if this is wrong. If I refresh this browser and it doesn't work, then my excitement was in vain. Oh, there it is. So when you do a flex start, it starts it from the top, and it takes the content that's in here and makes it equal to whatever's inside of this element, equal from the top to the bottom. If we were to do flex end, I'm going to go ahead and refresh. It now does it to the end of the element, which is going to be the bottom. And then you can also, I think it's just called center. Yeah. You can also align it center. All right. And this, let me show you this up here. I did an align item center on this. So if any of you ever have worked with an image, what I did is on the parent here, I made this a flex container. And then the text in here, I was able to, or on the parent, add the align items center. And then what it did is the flex container looked all the way down to the flex items or the children that were inside of it and was able to align that content to the center. So if you're ever working with like a logo and want to put your business name or whatever, using Flexbox is a really easy way to align that content. Okay, fun fact. So remember the align item stretch is default, so I'm just going to go ahead and get rid of this. All right, so refresh. Cool. So now that we've got all these things of these elements of equal size, what we're trying to do is add some margin between this. So I could do something easy like take the parent here, the call out, and we could just do like a margin right of like 40 pixels, okay? If I was to go save that, I could do that, but you'll notice here, I don't have any margin over here, but I've got this nasty looking margin over here, okay? And what we wanna do is, it was a little bit bigger than it needed to be. We want it to be snug to here. As with Flexbox, as you flex it bigger, I've got a massive screen here. This is like a 32-inch. And so Flexbox distributes the content evenly. But on my MacBook Pro, which is 1440 pixels, it looks like this. It hugs the edges. We want to put just margin in between the sides here. So we've created this, this nasty looking space over here. What I could do is I could go ahead and create another class and do call out, and then what is it? It's like called last child, and then do margin right 0. Whoa, not zoom out. There we go. And then refresh, and that would fix it, except that's not really like the Flexboxy way of doing things. So what I can do is let's get rid of this nasty CSS. And what we want to do is we want to add a width. Now we could do it the CSS way and just do a width here and say, I don't know, I want pretty much a 30%. Oh my gosh, guys, I'm sorry. This Apple mouse is driving me nuts. So we could add a width in flat out CSS of 30%. And I could go and do that, and it aligns things evenly for us. So I could create my column widths this way instead of using, sorry, let me get rid of that. Instead of using the flex item 1. There we go. And then I could try to space these things out. But there is a Flexbox way of distributing or creating widths for elements. And the way that we would do that is we're going to use, Nathan, what is it? Yeah, that's right, boy. Flex basis. So we can add the percentage this way. And I'll show you why we want to use flex basis versus, oh guys, what did I do? I think I added some garbage in here. Where did this border box? Oh, it's a wrap, sorry. Okay, I was like, what the heck is that? Like it was wrapping. I was like, what nasty stuff did I put in here? But I didn't put anything nasty. So let me get rid of this. And we're gonna do the flex basis of 30%. So we're setting the width this way. We don't want them to be even, so we're gonna get rid of the flex 1 because we wanna add margin in between this. And if we come over here and refresh, nothing changes because we just added the width of these columns the Flexbox way. So let's go ahead and add in this, this space. So let's see, I think it's going to be added to our parent here. Yeah, we're going to add this to the parent. Here, I'm going to make this there. All right, so we've got a display of flex here. Now what we want to do is we want to take the flex items, all the flex items inside of our flex container, and we want to distribute them evenly. So we can do a justify content, and we've got a couple of different options here. We're going to use the space between, and I'm going to show you the difference between space between and space around. So if we scroll over and refresh, you can now see that we've taken and added space, we've distributed space evenly between each one of the flex items inside of our flex container. All right. Now, so what that did is it put space in between the elements. Okay. On the outer elements on the right and the left here, there isn't an element around it, so it doesn't have anything to put space in between. Okay. The element in the middle is the only element inside of the flex container that has elements on the side of it, right and left, okay? So doing space between, put space in between the elements. Now, if I was to do space around, you'd imagine what it's gonna do is all the flex items inside of this, or the children, it puts, oops, didn't wanna save that. Refresh, it puts even space around the elements, okay? So what we're going for is we just want space in between. So we'll change this back. Cool, so really easy. We went through and was able to go and add that margin nicely. Now, I want to take an example here, and let me go ahead and refresh this. So we talked a little bit about mobile. So Flexbox, in many cases, makes laying out elements and everything to be mobile responsive really, really easy for us. Now remember, we added a flex basis of 30% to this. So if I narrow this down, everything squishes together real nice. You'll notice that the space between that I added isn't there anymore. It's because Flexbox is really, really smart, and it knows that when things get really, really small, that we don't need that extra space. It doesn't need to distribute any space evenly. It wants to fill in the gaps. So now let me show you here what would happen if we used a width of 30%. All right, I think this will work for us. So if I refresh this, everything's the same. And then if I used a regular width, you can all of a sudden see that our text is pouring out. We've got this space here that's been created because instead of using flex basis, which is smart, which says when we get really, really small, we don't need to create space in between the elements, and a normal width wouldn't be able to do that for us. So let me go back and change this. All right, so what we want though is, let me go ahead and refresh. Think about this being on mobile. Do we really want 3 columns on mobile? That doesn't make any sense. On mobile, I think it would be a lot smarter to have everything stack on top of each other, don't you? So we can go ahead and achieve this, and I'll show you how. So if we think about this, our Flex parent, our Flex container, is set to a display Flex, and it's putting everything inside of a row for us, okay? Now, if I was to go and take off the display Flex, it's just gonna stack these HTML elements on top of each other, right? So if I was to go ahead and refresh here, well, that achieves pretty much the desired result that I'm looking for, but how can I achieve this with Flexbox without getting rid of my Flex? Let's go ahead and put that out. This is where we could actually just add a media query. So I'm gonna come in here and let's just create a media query. I don't know why it puts all. And then let's just do like a min width. Oh, if I could spell. And then let's do like 900 pixels. And then we're gonna go ahead and take this here. We're gonna cut it out of the main container. We're gonna add the callouts container here, and then let's just go ahead and paste that in. So what have we done here? We've said now when the viewport is a minimum width of 900 pixels, then go ahead and lay everything out in a column. But if it's smaller than that, basically these CSS rules don't apply, and it's going to stack our elements as it would in regular HTML. So go ahead and save that. Let's see, let's go ahead and refresh. So you can see that we've got columns here. And then as soon as this hits less than 900 pixels, now we've applied the flex direction of row onto this and justified the content to distribute evenly. So pretty cool, right? Really easy that Flexbox just out of the box can help us build websites that work so well with mobile responsive. All right, so let's go ahead and move on to the next example. And the next example, we're going to be working with, let's just pretend that these numbers here are images. So a lot of time in our websites, we may have like a gallery of thumbnails or images. And what I've done here is each one of these blocks have a fixed width and height, okay? Now say when I get into a mobile state, I don't want these thumbnails or these images to change size. I don't want them to flex and you know, squish my images to be really tiny. I always want them to be this dimension. So right now, if we go ahead and we start shrinking this, oh, you guys. Oh, okay, yes. This is the right project, sorry. So what we want to happen, this is the final project I was showing you. I was showing you the one that we're working on. What we want to happen is when we flex this is we want everything to nicely stack underneath each other and keep the same exact dimensions that we've set to these images, okay? That's the desired result of what we're going for. Okay, let's come back to our project, and we're gonna move into fourth example. This is on line about 69. I'm gonna highlight this, and I'm gonna uncomment it. I'm gonna go ahead and save it, and then let's come over to our project and refresh that. So on a desktop, everything looks awesome. Everything looks just as it should. But here's what's tricky. I think I've already got the class here. Yeah, so I've already put this in the Flex parent here. We've already added a display of Flex. We've aligned the items to be, you know, perfectly centered in the middle of its element. And then we did the space around, which remember on these columns, we did space in between. On here, we put the space around all these Flex items. So everything looks right, but let's watch what happens when we shrink the browser. So you can see that the elements are still the same size, which is great. And it's like, okay, well, what's gonna happen now? And Flexbox is being so dang stubborn, and the regular size of this would probably come out to right here. It's a 150 wide by 100 height. But if these were real images and not numbers, this would be so smashed and the aspect ratio would be so distorted, it would just be messed up and look really bad. What we want to happen is as the viewport shrinks, we want the content to just wrap underneath it. So really interesting. Again, when we added the display flex, remember how we have a couple of default properties to that. We have like the, what is it? The flex direction by default is a row, right? And then the, what was it? That was the auto, that was stretch. I think it was align items is stretch by center. Or, yeah. Oh man, you guys, we did it in this. Nathan. Dude, you were killing us with your echoing, or somebody's echoing. Sorry, I always like to blame things on my brother. The second something goes wrong, I blame it on him. But anyways, fourth example, there's that default property that, remember, makes our columns all the same height. So what we're going to do is there is another default property that happens when we add display flex to something. It gives us a flex wrap of no wrap. And that's exactly what's happening here. Is there's no wrap that's happening. Flexbox is just forcing all of this content to be smashed. Well, this is a really, really, really easy problem to solve. Does anybody have the answer? If we don't want to wrap this, we want to wrap it. You guys are so good. So we can go ahead and wrap this. I'm going to go ahead and refresh, shrink the browser down, and look at this. Flexbox so elegantly just throws these elements underneath each other. So when you have a gallery or you're working with different content, text, images, whatever, if you on the Flex container or the Flex parent just add the Flex wrap, everything will elegantly wrap underneath it. Okay? Pretty easy. Pretty cool. All right. Let's move on to the next example. Example number 5. All right, so example 5, about line 77 here. I'm going to highlight this. I'm going to go ahead and uncomment it and save. If I go to our project, refresh, you can see that I've just created a box, and then I've got some text in the corner. Now, if we go over to the final project, what we really, really want to happen is we're going to use Flexbox to center things. All right? Now, this is really, really exciting to me. Centering things in CSS can sometimes just be an absolute nightmare. It's just a joke when you're trying to, like, centering text like in the center of a div is easy, but when you're trying to center it in the exact middle of like an entire element like what we have here, it can be a nightmare. So to achieve this, we can do it the non-Flexbox way. And what we can do is, let's see, how would I do this? Oops. On the parent, we can add a text align center. Okay. So this will, you can do that on the actual element or the parent. I'm just going to do it for the parent. And it puts the text in the middle. And then what I could do is, some of you may have seen this like CSS trick. You can add like a position of like relative top 50%. And then you can use the transform property, and we'll do, yeah, I think it's translate Y. So position relative, we're going to push it down 50% from the top of the element, and then we want to drag it up 50% from the bottom. And if I refresh this, that's one way of achieving it, okay? Doing it that way doesn't always work. For my whole life, I have used this method of centering an element in the center of its parent. I've always used this. And then I learned about Flexbox and realized there is a way easier way to do this. All right, so all we have to do here is go to our container, and we're going to add a display of flex to our parent. Okay, so now we've just taken and applied this as like a flex direction row. Okay, and then we're going to make this so easy. And on the class here, on the flex item that we're trying to center, you've probably before used like margin auto, right, to center something in the middle. Well, when you use the display flex on a parent, what you can do is, now that we've put the flex direction into just a row, and remember, by default, it sets the column or the row to be equal to the height of whatever content is inside of it. Well, actually, in this case, we gave it a fixed height. But anyways, we know the height of this already, and by adding the flex to it, we can use this entire height here. So if we used margin auto, this is going to distribute the margin evenly between the top, left, bottom, right. Okay, let me make sure I save this. And if I go ahead and actually, let me, sorry, I want to get rid of this so that you can see that it's back in the corner here. And then I'm going to go ahead and add just the simple margin auto. Refresh. Boom. Right in the middle there. Isn't that freaking awesome? Oh my gosh, with just 2 properties. That's all it takes, is a display of flex and a margin auto. And the margin auto, remember, distributes the extra space evenly around the element. Because this element here, this might, the width and height of this could always be unknown. What if you were using text and you had this huge sentence, right? The width could always be different. Or you had an image and the dimensions of it are always different. Sometimes that CSS trick doesn't always align the element that you need. But if you put a flex, make this a flex container, and then just do a margin of auto, it distributes the margin equally on all 4 sides of the element. I thought that was really cool. When I learned about that, I don't know, I wrote about it in my journal. That's how good it was. All right, guys, we have one last example. How are we doing on time? Oh, perfect. This will be just about an hour. That's excellent. Perfect. So the last thing that we're going to work with is using Flexbox to build columns and to use multiple rows in columns. All right. So you can see that we've got 2 columns here. And then over on this right-hand side, I've got pretty much 2 rows, right? We've got 2 columns, 2 things that go up and down. And then these containers over here are in a row. They're stacking on one another. So let's go ahead and get to it. So right now, come back to our project. On about line 84, we're going to go ahead and we're going to uncomment the last exercise here, all the way down to just above the body. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and save this. Let me scroll this down to the 6th example CSS. I'm going to go to our project. We're going to refresh. And so what we have here is we have this massive container with a bunch of text in it. And then we've got 2 more elements here that have the exact height of the content that's inside of it. So these elements are as tall as the font size, okay? But we want them to be the same size as whatever this column is. All right, so who knows what the first thing we're gonna do here? We've got our parent container, okay? And then we've got the first body of text here. And then we've got the second, I guess we could think of this as the first column. And then we've got the second column with its 2 example rows in here. Okay, so let's work first with the parent here. What do we have to do to the parent in order to allow us to turn these into flex items, to use flex properties on them? Johnny, anybody screaming? Display flex, crack the code. You are freaking great. All right, display flex, right? And with that comes a few default properties. It's going to put it in a flex direction of row, and it's going to create all the content that's inside of here by default. I think that's flex item stretch. Shoot, I forgot what it is, guys. You need to tell me. All right, and then if we refresh that, pretty simple. All right, so we've got, and again, the browser by default, it takes the element that has the most content. It's going to give it some room to breathe. You can see that the second parent that we have here, I put a background of yellow so we can see the height of this is equal to the first part here. And then we've got those two like mini rows in there that only have a height equal to the content that's inside the element. So we just did the first part of this. The next part is we want to make these two elements inside of our flex row equal widths. So we can turn these into columns. How? How can I get this body of text to be the same width as this yellow one here? Right now, the yellow one, the yellow container is only as wide as the elements inside of it, whereas this one's massive. Anybody in the chats know how we can make these of equal widths? What property are we going to use? See anybody chiming in, Nate? Close. So crack the code. What would you add flex column on? What parent? Are we going to add this to equal height or the first or the second? Are we going to add it to this parent or this parent?
He says parent.
Okay. So, well, let's just kind of see what would happen, right? So remember, display flex gives this flex direction of row, which is lining the content left to right. But crack the code. If I'm adding this to the wrong element, just yell at me. If we change this to a column, all of a sudden it's not going to go left to right. It's going to do what? It's top to bottom. Almost kind of what we wanted. It now made this element as wide as this one above, but now we're stacking from top to bottom, and that's not what we want. Any other answers? No. Okay. So remember, we can use the property flex, right? So on our first column, we're going to do a flex of 1, which is our base. And if we add that to the second parent here, we've now told these two elements to take the base width and divide it evenly of the width of the parent container up here. So let's go ahead and refresh. And now you can see that we've done just that. Okay, we've got the this container here is now the size of this entire thing here. So we've split the columns up. Now what we want to do, and if anybody's confused here, remember we've got the first column which has the text in it, which is here, and then the second column has a background of yellow. Okay, we haven't touched the rows that are inside of it yet. So we've just set the column widths to be equal, which is great. That's the first thing we want to achieve. Now, say this is an article or something, and then these are images or maybe just some subtext, whatever's going on over here, or maybe this is a giant image, and we want these columns to always be the equal height to this, no matter how big this element gets, no matter how much content is added to it. So what we're going to do is we're going to come over. Let's see. Let me see how our stuff is displayed here. So the first thing that we want to do is sorry, we've got this here. I'm thinking out loud here. So right now we've got these in rows, but I need these to stack on top of each other, which they are. Hold on. Okay, that makes sense. All right, so what we want to do is if we were to go to these columns here, and basically what we need to do is we need to nest a flex inside of a flex. So we've got our parent flex container up top here. And now what I need to do is I need to do the same thing to this container, because right now I'm going to be inheriting the flex direction of row. So the first part of this is a flex direction of row, but now I need to turn this into its own column so I can stack things into it. Because right now we've just got the content technically is displaying left to right. That's why we can't fill this. So what we need to do is on the second parent here, we want to turn this into a column. So we're going to do flex direction column. That way, those elements are going to be of equal width going from top to bottom. So I'm going to go ahead and save that, refresh, and we don't see anything. And maybe I'm adding this backwards here. Oh, wait, sorry, guys. What are we doing here? We need to add, I can't use a flex direction of column. Do you know why? Because I can't, flex directions need to be used with the display flex. I can't display flex, or flex direction is a parent level style rule for Flexbox. It's a parent level, and it can only be applied if there is a display of flex on the parent. There is no display of flex on this parent we're working with, so I can't use the flex direction of column. So we have to do a, if I can spell, display of flex. Now I can use this parent level property here because we've added the flex property to this parent. Okay, so now if I go ahead and refresh, nothing changed. But that's because we need to add something to the children here. I'll show you the example. I'm going to have to reverse engineer this after I add the properties to these to show you why we needed to add a new flex, display of flex, and turn this into a flex column. All right, so let's see. Now what we want to do is we need to get these to be of equal space. Here, I think I just have to remove this for now. So we're going to do the same exact thing that we did to these two containers to make these two columns the same size. We did a flex of 1. Well, now we've added the display flex, and we want to do the same exact thing to these rows here. We want them to equal the same exact, equal the height of the container that it's in to this guy, because right now they're only as tall as the element that it's in. So I'm going to go ahead and add a flex 1. And then we're going to add a flex 1. All right, go ahead and refresh. Okay, this is why I did what I did. Now I remember. Now I remember. Okay, so remember, we can only use these flex item properties on children when we have a parent flex. So in order for us to use these, so if I was to delete this, I hope this example works, and refresh. Yeah, see how on these two rows we have a flex 1? We've told these elements to take up the same exact space, but it doesn't have a parent that allows me to use these. So this is why we add display flex. Now we know that display flex by default makes this a flex direction of row. So if I do this, it makes sense. We've got a flex direction of row, so it aligns our elements left to right equal width. Well, we've got that. Well, we need this to stack on top of one another, and we need to turn it into a column. So this is why we specify the flex direction to a column, which overrides the default property, which was row, or the default rule. And we go through and we did it. Holy smokes. Pretty cool, right? So this is how we can work with multiple rows inside of our flex container. Okay? So a few takeaways from this is you can only use flex item properties if the parent has a display of flex on it. Okay. On our parent here, we did display flex. So we were able to use these flex item properties, but the display flex only goes one child deep. Okay. The child here, it's a second child in. We've got the parent. Well, technically, we've got parent, child, subchild. Okay, display flex only works one child deep. And so to be able to work with flex items inside of this child here, we had to create a new flex container. so that we could target flex item properties inside of the children here. Okay. So that is it, everybody. That's a wrap. That is a very, very basic overview and introduction to Flexbox. There is a lot more that you can do with it, and we'll be diving deeper into more advanced things later on in life. But this is a simple example, and again, you would be using this because it's a lot lighter to use native CSS than it is throwing in third-party libraries like Bootstrap. Now, Bootstrap is amazing. I'll use it forever. Our website is built using Bootstrap, but I built a landing page yesterday all in Flexbox, which was pretty cool. So let me stop sharing my screen, and I'm going to drop in the final source code to this project in the chats. So let me stop my screen share, and then let me open up this. Okay, and then let me get the final here. Hey, why didn't that drop? Boom. Okay, so there's the final source for you. Let me read through the chats. Was somebody having a problem? I think I got it. Adding display flex. All right. Any questions, anybody? Any questions at all? This has been recorded, and so it will be available, and I'll post a link to that in the Slack channel. All right, Johnny, Nate, did you guys see any questions come up?
Nope. Oh, here's one. Is the Flexbox better than the native CSS grid?
I do not have a comment for that, only because I have used Bootstrap this whole time, and then recently got into Flexbox, but I know that CSS also has their own grid style type properties, and I'd imagine maybe there's times where Flexbox would come in, it would be a better tool to use than maybe the CSS grids, but I don't know yet. I don't know. I haven't dived into that. I will though. I'll look for an answer. Sweet. Well, thanks everybody. That is a wrap. I hope you guys learned a lot of cool things about Flexbox, or at least got your gears turning in your brain about how you can start using Flexbox in your own projects. All right.
Awesome,
Ciao,
man.
everybody. I will see you in the chats.
Laters.
Peace.